Hello everyone. A lot of people on my Instagram have asked me to do a few plant videos, so I wanted to start with an orchid watering video. These are some of my most favorite plants for quite obvious reasons. Their blooms are spectacular. Their foliage is rather nice. A lot of the time, they're really glossy and smooth. This girl's kind of floppy, but she's doing her best, and oh my god, I love her. If I could get it. I love her so much. So today, we'll be watering my orchids. Thanks for joining me. Okay, so orchids are kind of odd when it comes to houseplants. They like distilled water. They are severely allergic to tap water. Well, allergic in the terms of it hurts their leaves, it'll turn them brown, they'll get floppy, they don't like the chemicals in the water. So right now, since I don't really have a water filter, I just use water bottles and I recycle these. It's what I've got for now, and they seem to absolutely love it, so that's what we'll be using today. So I like to start with ones that seem to need the most watering. At the moment, they're all pretty hydrated. I usually water them once a week, but most of the time, if you go longer than that, they'll get really droopy, and that's not good. It means they're dehydrated. We'll start with this little mini Phalenopsis here. I forgot to mention these are all Phalenopsis orchids. These are like the most basic orchids you could buy at a store. This is mostly what you'll see, I believe, unless you go to like an orchid nursery or something like that. So this is a mini phal that I purchased at Walmart, and this is her oldest leaf. You can see it's kind of bendy and floppy. Her other leaves aren't really like that. They're a lot stiffer. So she's in need of some water. And another reason we use distilled water is because of their roots. That little green thing is a root. These plants need a really airy mixture to live. They don't like being in regular potting soil. They'll drown or suffocate. So I've got them in a nice orchid bark mixture, really chunky. They're doing pretty good. I've opened all my water bottles and we're ready to go. What I'm actually going to do is let this girl soak for a minute in her regular container. These are just water dishes. And most of the time when I water my orchids, I add like a powdered orchid fertilizer into this water. But I've already done that 3 times the previous weeks. So now what I'm going to do is just use regular water to hopefully rinse all of the fertilizer salt out of their orchid bark and maintain nice and healthy roots, because sometimes the fertilizer will build up and kill your plant. And I wait until the water is at that line, and I'm just going to leave her to soak for 10 minutes. Okay, now that she's done, I'm going to go ahead and start with the bigger girls. And let's see, I'll start with you since you're closest. A lot of these don't have flower spikes because they're out of season. Well, they were out of season when their old blooms died. I cut them off. And through the spring and summer, what they mostly do is they produce new roots, and that thing right there in the middle, that's a new leaf. So these plants grow vertically, which is really cool. And then I'm just going to give them a good rinse. Make sure the water goes all the way through. I don't know if you guys like this kind of video, but I thought it would be fun to make. I love caring for my orchids. It's actually really therapeutic for me. Okay, and you can see that the water has run through, and she should be good to go. You can see a few more roots. This girl has gotten ridiculously big over the summer. I can't remember what color her flowers were, but I remember that I love her very much. And we'll start with you as well. This one, I remember, was the very first orchid I ever bought. She's my girl. I love her so much. Her flowers, I do believe, were a yellowish purple color. She hasn't put out a new spike for me yet, but she's grown a lot. She's gotten like 4 or 5 new leaves since she's been here. So she's pretty happy. This is her newest one. It's smaller than all the rest, but she's doing good. She's also kind of got a hefty lean going on. Most orchids, they'll try to grow sideways because they grow off of trees and they don't like water being caught in the crown of their leaves. It actually produces rot. So what they're trying to do is grow sideways, even though I'm making sure I don't get water on them, because that's just what they do. Okay, and then this girl right here, I am so freaking excited. This is the first orchid that has ever actually produced a brand new flower spike since the old one died. I don't know if you could really get close on that, or let's see. Nope, it won't focus. But that's a new flower spike. It's getting really big, so hopefully the flowers are just as nice. I can't remember what order I bought the rest of these in, but she's been here a while too. She threw one new leaf for me, and her roots are doing really well, so that's all I could ask for. I'm so excited. I can't wait for that flower spike to bloom. And as you can see, all I'm trying to do is make sure all that water gets through and really rinses out that orchid bark. These plants are actually really easy to care for in my experience as compared to some of my other ones. A lot of people get intimidated by them because they look so exotic. A lot of people actually think that the plant dies after it blooms, which is totally false. But they're doing great. Okay, now this big girl over here. I'm gonna move mini me out of the way. My bottle caps. I like to make sure that their dish is close to the water bucket, that way I don't drip it all over my desk, because this is my desk. And as you can see, this is an older orchid. She's pretty big. I think her flowers are yellow. This right here is actually the old orchid spike. You can see where I cut it off right there. I did it because it turned yellow. The rest of the stalk was green, so I cut it short right there because I heard that it could potentially produce another flower spike from here or even lower on the plant, which I wanted to show you. Those are how the roots grow. They look like little fat worms. They're kind of funny looking. I think it's exciting though. Okay, so let's get this girl watered up. Oh, I almost dropped that water bottle. That would not have been good. We'll just give her a nice rinse. I gotta actually go dump that out soon. Usually these girls can take a whole water bottle. If not, maybe more. I'm sure they wouldn't mind. Sometimes I soak them once a week or once every 2 or 3 weeks. That way they really get a good watering in. Especially over summer. A lot of the times they sit on the floor in front of my desk because that's a really sunny spot and they seem to really like it there. I don't really leave them on a shelf because I don't think they would do as well as on the floor. Now for my rebloom girl. When I actually bought this one, she was in a little like plastic chalice, so she has absolutely exploded in growth since then. these were her original flower spikes, and each little node here was where a bud used to be. These were really the only ones that stayed after the old ones died. So I have a feeling that that one, the one I'm zooming in on right now, would be the one to bloom next. I just woke up the other day and this is what was waiting for me. I was so happy. Like, orchids are just beautiful. I'm hoping to get a couple other kinds soon once I get more room for more plants, but for now, Phalenopsis are everywhere. Not that that's a bad thing, they come in all kinds of crazy different colors, so if you really want a nice plant that's relatively easy to take care of and is something really pretty, I definitely recommend Phalenopsis Orchids. And normally I would give her a soak since this leaf looks kind of floppy. It went floppy a little while ago, but I gave her a good soak every watering for 10 minutes and she just bounced right back. I actually give her a little more water since there's not as much coming out of the bottom as I would like. There we go. Okay, and this one, I can't remember if it was this one. One of my orchids has a root that's coming out of the side of the pot, and I don't like that, so I might have to repot that one soon. Okay. And normally the ones that are in bloom sit on my desk, and there's only 2 of them right now, so I still have room for maybe a begonia or something. Like, normally I put that begonia right there on my desk in place of one of these phals since they get so big. Alright, let's see, I watered you. Last girl. And this one is my biggest one right now in terms of foliage size. That's usually how I tell how big they are, because obviously as compared to these girls over here, she is a very how I would say mature orchid. Her leaves are literally bigger than my hand. And of course her flower spikes, sorry about that, her flower spikes are ridiculously tall. And most of the time I don't touch the blooms. If you touch them a lot, they seem to get really irritated and fall off early. And these flowers can last for months, so I try not to touch them as much as I can. And that little guy right there is actually another flower bud. Hopefully it blooms soon. And I've actually left her in the pot that she came in, but I am sure by the time spring rolls around that I'm going to have to give this mama a repot because these roots are freaking ridiculous. Like, all those silver lines in there are her roots. She needs a little wiggle room, I do believe. So, I'll just give her a good water. She seems happy here too. Yeah, she seems pretty happy here. Most of the time, this is the one that I don't need to soak or water a bunch because there aren't any air slits in the pot, and that gives her a little more time to hydrate between waterings as compared to my other orchids. At least a little bit. And I always make sure to drain the excess water just in case. I don't want anything messing with her roots or anything. I don't want her getting rot or any of that bad kind of stuff. And the timer for my mini phal is done, so give me a moment and we'll put her back where she goes. Okay, now that our room is all back in order, I have another thing that I would like to do considering orchids today, and that is repot my other mini Phalenopsis orchid today. And this one is kind of special. As you can see, it doesn't look anything like the other ones. It's still a Phalenopsis, of course, and it's still very mini, like I'll show you in comparison to another orchid. She's really, really small and her blooms are actually really tiny. I haven't gotten another flower spike, but to my absolute shock and surprise, I have a baby Phalenopsis coming out of it. This thing right here is called a keiki, which is what baby orchids are called. And a lot of the times, the only way to really get one is for one to come off of a flower spike of a mother orchid. So instead of a flower bloom, it would come out and it would be a little keiki and it would produce roots and you could separate it and repot it from the mom. This is called a basal keiki, and I don't think you can separate these. So basically, I have 2 orchids in one pot. And we're going to be giving her a little bit more wiggle room today because I don't think this pot is really good for her anymore. So let me put a mat down and we'll get started on that. So what I'll start by doing is just putting a little bit of orchid bark mix into the new pot. This one's quite a bit bigger. I didn't really have a good mediate or intermediate size to put the Phalenopsis into. Now the way you really repot these is a lot different than most of the other plants that I have. Instead of putting a little soil in the bottom of the new pot, I put the orchid into the pot by itself first, because these roots have a lot of aerial space in between and they need a little help when it comes to filling in spaces. She's being stubborn, give me a moment. And as you can see, she has definitely regrown her pot. That is a root that is stuck, and that's why she's being stubborn and not coming out of her pot. Thanks. Okay, so this is what an orchid's root system looks like. And this one isn't in as good a shape as I would like. So I'm going to trim up some of the roots and give it a nice spray in hydrogen peroxide 3%. Alright, so I took 2 roots from her that were totally gone. And what I'm going to do is just try to hold this in and fill up the pot as best I can. And there we have it, all good as new. She's got her baby and she's good to go in a nice brand new pot that hopefully she won't try to crawl out of again. Thank you so much for joining me on an orchid watering day. Hope you guys are good. Be safe out there. I'll be back soon.